All right, RotoBallers, we are back for the RotoBaller PGA show. 3 wide like the NASCAR last week. Looking for a winner, which we have 2 of either side of Spencer this week. He took care of things at Pebble for us, and we kind of, pinch hit on the other side of things here and making the RotoBaller people a little happier with a nice little Jake Knapp W from me and Joe Idone. Joe Idone at Tour Picks on X. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful today, man. So it's been a long drought for me, maybe my longest one ever. I did not envision that ending with Jake Knapp, but happy that it did. It's never easy, is it, Byron? I mean, that was as fucking stressful as a final round that I can remember. And our boy got it done. I'm happy about that. It's my hometown event this week, so it's been great Monday for me.
Your hometown of Palm Springs?
Yeah, right. Just right down here in Palm Springs. We're going to check out the Honda Classic this week.
That's what happens when you let a South African take control of a Twitter account and not concentrate when he's tweeting out. But Spencer, I sent to you a message. Okay, Jake's got a 4-shot lead on one other person that can win this tournament. He doesn't need to make this more stressful than it is. Turns out he did. But you had yourself a decent week as well, and it was glad to see that you kind of bounced back from the deathbed there.
Yeah, last week I missed the show, wasn't feeling great, but it's nice to be back with you this week, Byron. And I think that when you look at our entire RotoBaller team from top to bottom, like everybody at this point is firing on all cylinders. Joe and myself have been pretty much dismantling the head-to-head game. I mean, like both of us are at like 65-70% on the season there. So a lot of success in the head-to-head market. Both of you guys had the outright. You mentioned the Wyndham Clark ticket that I hit a couple weeks ago. Things are going very well with the RotoBaller team. If you're not doing so already, we hope you consider checking everything out. But very excited to be back, Byron.
Yeah, happy to have you back, Spence. I will say that I did enjoy having Joe on the show because I had 48 of my 150 lineups make it through in the 150 max, which was like something I've never had happen before. And then instantly Nikolai Højgaard decided to not play good golf over the weekend, of which I had 100 lineups of him. And then Orbielson as well, just also. Like the guys I needed, like the chalky, expensive guys I got through, they didn't show up. But it's okay. I'll do a second show with Joe maybe a little later, like a midnight edition or something, and we'll get ourselves rolling. And before we get in, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the only negative thing that I could really point towards for last week is if you look at the RotoBaller one and done contest, pretty much everybody other than you, Byron, who had Chan Kim, I think everybody else had Nikolai Højgaard. So it is a dead heat almost across the board. Everybody's like somewhere between 1.1 to about 1.7 million. So it's a hotly contested contest there that we have going on.
It is tight. It is, and it's been fun. You know, we've had some interesting names show up and we've had some interesting names not show up that we showed up in our articles, but has not been ideal. You know, this has been a weird year for, I was listening to Joe, on Preferred Lines earlier, and it's like, where no one on the PGA Tour wants to win. Like no one wants to put their hand up who's been here for a while and win a goddamn tournament. Like it's just been like letdown after letdown from the superstars, which is, it's concerning. It's also exciting. I don't know where my mind needs to go with this, but it's something. So do you think it's a talent deprivation situation, or do you think it's just a really random sequence of variation that we've seen to start the year, Spence?
I mean, I think if we look at the players that have won, like I was actually doing this exercise earlier today because I was curious to look to see where I had everybody ranked in my model, each one of these contests. I think if you look at Chris Kirk, Pavon, Clark, my model didn't like Nick Taylor, but there were a lot of people on Nick Taylor that week, Hideki, Jake Knapp. I don't think that that's that bad of a group of players. Like maybe there were a handful of those options, whether it's Wyndham Clark or, I think Pavon was probably too highly priced also. Like those were not golfers that necessarily should have been 100-to-1 golfers. Now, I think when you look at the Grayson Murray, Nick Dunlap sort of an answer, and that just so happened to come the second and third weeks into the year where you really started seeing all of this enter the mix. Those were a little bit more shocking, but I can't necessarily say that we have gotten like completely out of left field winners here. I do think it goes to prove to your point a little bit. You lose some talent to live, and all of a sudden, if the 4 players at the top of the board that are your favorites to win don't come through, all of a sudden it opens things up for everybody underneath. But I think maybe I'm a little bit different in that mentality where you look at all those names, like specifically from Pavon and on, every single one of those golfers to me is a really good player.
Yes, they're really good players. Maybe you can say outside of Wyndham Clark and Hideki, they're not elite though. We've got top 10 golfers in the world that aren't winning these tournaments when they should be. They're in the mix and they're just not getting it done. So, Joe, do you have any random take on that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is like a bit of memory loss for me where I'm misremembering the past, but I don't remember the top end 5 or 6 guys being this flawed in many instances in a while. Like, everyone wants to crown Scotty Scheffler as the number 1 player, and he is, right? There's no one you're going to rank above him, but he's got major flaws. A major flaw, I should say. Rory has some flaws right now. Victor Hovland is in the midst of potentially dealing with some demons right now with his swing. Xander can't win. Patrick Cantlay can't break 80 on a Sunday. There are guys up there. John Rahm has actually blown 2 big Sundays or the final days of Live where he's not coming through. So I don't remember this. Even when Rahm at the beginning of last year, felt like he had no flaws, right? He had won 4 events in 2 months. Scotty before that had won 4 events. I remember the number 1 player in the worlds before then, where it was, whether it was going back to Spieth or whether it was Dustin Johnson or whether it was Brooks Koepka, where it just felt like, man, this guy can't do anything wrong right now. The top 6 players in the world all have big flaws. And what I was mentioning to Ryan is it's really created what I believe is an opportunity for the guy who, a Sam Burns, who's 20th in the world. If Sam Burns wins a big event like Bay Hill or the Players, there's not much to stop me from saying he's a top 5 player in the world all of a sudden, because I can't really lump Xander in there. I can't put Cantlay. If a guy hasn't won in 2 years, how am I going to make him a top 5 player in the world? There's 40 freaking events a season. Go win something. So that's the biggest thing for me, is I think the rankings are probably correct. I don't know if it's necessarily talent deprivation, but I do feel like there's never been the top end talented players with this many notable, serious flaws that we can point to in their game.
Yeah. I'm rocking the Penguin shirt because I've got a type. I hit guys with mullets that wear Penguin original shirts. That's my type. I've hit now 4 of those guys in my betting career.
Yeah.
3 of them with Cam Smith and 1 of them with Jake Knapp. And when Cam was in the mix, when he wasn't in the mix, it was because he was playing terribly. But when he was just such a savage, his putting would just be like Nick Taylor-esque in a way. I mean, not in a way. It was, that's just, you had these guys that would just take care of business. Brooks in majors then.
Oh my God.
Where has this been? We've been.
Dude, they might all be on Live, like you mentioned. They're not far. It'll never happen because they can't get the points and there's no way to compare them cross events. But Cam, Rahm, Brooks, DJ, Bryson, they aren't far from being top 5 players in the world right now. And if they're all clicking, they're all fucking savages on a Sunday and would not be blowing some of these leads. And that's why it's the gap is closing. There's just really not a fair way to equally rate them based on the fields that they play in, based on the shortened rounds, based on the lack of competition at the bottom end of Live. It's just unfortunate, I think, for both sides that we can't really say that DJ after a win is a top 5 player in the world. We can't give him that.
And you just don't. I know. That's the world we live in right now, and it is what it is. I guess there's no need to kind of cry about that anymore. We kind of just have to deal with it. My Rick Run Good always starts when I'm on the show. I don't know what is going on with this. It's a terrible. It's just like my phone starts playing the most random times. It happened with Joe last week. I don't know what the deal is. Sorry about that, folks.
I wanted to Rick maybe just wants to enter the show one of this week.
We should invite him. We'll get him on the.
Byron, there's one thing I want to say though, just as an exercise test here. Like, I think it's really interesting to compare because I brought up the winners from 2022. I was curious to see some of these name differences here. And I think there's two really big noticeable names that come into the mix. So I'll start at the Tournament of Champions. Cameron Smith, live golfer now.
Yep.
You get Hideki at the Sony. You get Hudson Swafford at the American Express. So that's one of your outlier sort of names there. Luke List at the Farmers Insurance Open. Luke List is a better golfer now than he was then. Tom Hoagie won at Pebble Beach. Scotty Scheffler took down the Waste Management. I think like that Scheffler mix is kind of where you've lost. And then all of a sudden at the Genesis, Joaquin Niemann won. So, I mean, really outside of Scotty, it's Cameron Smith and Niemann are the two best players on that list. And now both of those two guys are live golfers. So, I mean, I do think we've seen slow starts before. The one big difference would be that some of these other guys that were that next tier of players or in that top tier of players, when you look at a Cameron Smith, they're just not here anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's less of them to stumble, to not stumble across the finish line. So
and even creating the drama within those finishes, like it was Cam Smith toe to toe with Rahm, right? It was Scheffler was kind of right there with Hudson Swafford that year, I believe, who won the Amex. Luke List won in a playoff against like Will Zalatoris when he was like peak Will Zalatoris there. So like we had the drama, even if the big name didn't necessarily win. They were there to make it compelling down the finish. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what we've sort of been missing on Knapp versus Valimaki. And like these guys is it's okay to have that guy win, but we also want to see him battling Goliath. That's part of what makes the story great. And that's kind of where I felt that sort of lack of pop this year.
Yeah, our Goliaths have got arthritis right now. Like when they have to like shift and get into the heat of battle, their knees are flaring up and they're like tripping over their ankles, and it's not good. We need to get them figured out, get them into the doctor, and rock and roll. Yeah, but let's dive into the odds board here to start off with. We've got some interesting names to start off at the top here, with Rory sitting at 7-1, Cam Young at 20-1, and Benny On at 25-1 on DraftKings. And before we get into the odds, I want to ask you both the question about Benny On. I have a 45-1, but I don't want to speak about that because it's not even the same bet now that it's 25-1. So we've had this discussion a few times on me and you, Spence. So I'll go to Joe first and ask, like, how do you like view a number shifting that drastically? And I know both of you kind of do most of your betting as the week unfolds. I'm a big believer in kind of nailing the value because I'm not the best outright golf like picker in the world. So I try and find the best odds early on a Monday. How do you kind of approach odds drifting so drastically and kind of into unbettable range, like with Benny On this week, Joe Idone?
Yeah, I think so. The first books that will post odds, I don't have access to, right? Okay. So it's typically like starts with DraftKings or Bet365, and I don't have it. So a lot of those early numbers I miss. What I try to do, and even if I'm not like writing this down or keeping this in a spreadsheet, I try to hone in on the players. And doing the article for RotoBaller on Sunday about the next week has kind of helped me with this. So I'll try to hone in on players that I'm looking for and put an imaginary number in my head. Like all of last week, I'm thinking like, if I get a 30 on Eric Cole, like I'm going to take that bet, right? And then when you see it available, you take it. If you miss it and it goes to the point like a Benny On where you miss 20 points, wait at that point. Because what I found this year more than any is at least the outlets that I use are relinquishing some of the hold that they have as the week transpires. So like you would see in an NFL game or these other games, the sportsbook want to hold more to protect themselves on a Monday. Like they're not going to release $100,000 limits on a Monday. They want to kind of see where the action plays out. And as you sort of get to Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening, they tighten that gap a little bit. So they're willing to increase the odds across the board on players that they want action on. A good sports book is there to want action. They aren't there to prevent and protect themselves against getting exposed on a big bet. The proper sports books out there want to entice action. So they want to throw you a bone. So whether it's an odds boost or whether it's increasing the odds by 5% in lowering their hold on a particular market on a Wednesday afternoon, I think it's advantageous at that point to wait. And if you had Benny on at a good bet at 25-1 before the odds boards are out, and you got to kind of swallow that pill and say you missed it. I was going to bet this number. It's still available. So kind of making your own numbers in your head or theoretically has sort of helped me with that a little bit.
I love it. Spence, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe said that pretty much exactly spot on. Like, kind of to pull both worlds into one there. I would say that the sharpest movement is what occurs early on. That's the Ben on sort of a movement where he goes from 45 into the sub 30s. I think the drift later in the week is when you get that softening of the hold percentage, these sports books trying to increase action and take on some extra liability in some other spots. But no, I mean, I think that to be a proper sports bettor, and I think to find the biggest edges you can, this is something to where you need to be very, I mean, this is another one of, I guess, my like bad dad jokes I'm about to do, but you have to be very cognizant of what is going on throughout the week here. So like you want to attack the board early to get your value, but you also need to stay on top of things as we move forward with it. So, value is the end name of the game here. We all want value on the prices we can get. So if you can get that value early, great. But there are going to be drifts that occur where numbers, whether that's in a matchup or a outright or a placement, numbers shift. And if you can get some of that advantage there, there's a second opening that comes into play later in the week.
Absolutely. Awesome. And just to sort of touch on that, hold some money back. Like it's similar to a position like if you have $1,000 that you want to put into the stock market and you want to go get Apple, right? You should. My advice would not be to put all 1,000 in right away, right? Because if that price continues to drop and you end up getting a better number from a sports betting perspective, if Steven Yeager goes from, if you bet it at 40-1 and on Wednesday it's 50-1, go back in and try to add some more to that. That's why you don't spend your entire unit necessarily up front unless you love the number, because if that number increases, then you can sort of make that margin in between at 45 and increase your value on that bet. So I always try to hold something back. Don't empty your account on a Monday into these things. You shouldn't be doing that anyways. But if you hold something back, if your numbers increase, I would always advise to add more, even if it's $5-10, add more onto that bet when you get the better odds, because if you liked it at 40, you should love it at 50.
Yeah, I love that philosophy too. I don't necessarily adhere to it as well as you should, but hey, find your thing that works for you and kind of go with that too, So I think that's also another lesson. And that's 18 minutes into the show, we can finally start chatting about some actual bets as Phoebe squeaks on a toy in the background here, because why would life be unchaotic in Back Down Bets headquarters over here? But talk to me about Rory, boys. Yes or no? Kind of, we don't have to really touch on him all that much. If you were to, I don't know how to kind of, let's just go from a DFS perspective. At 12-2, will you be playing Rory or not?
Go ahead, Spence.
Spencer.
I always like Rory. I think we get a very intriguing situation here where the form in 2024 has been subpar by his standards. Now you get this price increase at 12,200 where I'm curious to see where the ownership moves over the next, let's say, 24 hours here. But I'm kind of under this mentality that at this $12,200 price tag, and there's going to be a lot of ownership that people are going to want to take in this $9,000 range, like the Ben Ons, the Eric Coles. There's a lot of really good names there, and there's a lot of names I like there. But I do think Rory is the best player, obviously, in this field. And I'm curious to see where this ownership ends up, because I think this is a really nice buyback spot for him, to where I don't know if the public is necessarily going to agree with me on that.
He's interesting, man, because I think what's really peculiar in this situation is the $1,500 price tag difference between him and the second golfer in the field, and the fact that this golf course, he's easily the best and most talented golfer in the field. Like, there's no doubt about that. but this course doesn't suit him that well. So it makes you think that he's not necessarily like the best golfer in the field. I don't know. I'm doing a terrible job of kind of explaining that, but it doesn't seem like he can be peak Rory in this environment, if that makes any sense.
I don't want to use this argument because I don't think that this is necessarily the best thing to throw out what a sports book is releasing and go from there. But I do think it's interesting to note. So there's 2 head-to-head matchups that are currently out in the space right now. I see him against Cameron Young. I see him against Russell Henley.
Rory.
He's minus 225 against Cameron Young. He's minus 200 against Henley.
Yeah,
now, you could make an argument that there's not value in those numbers. You can make an argument that maybe you like the other side of it. But I think that goes to show where sports books believe Rory should be. So when you get this like $1,500 increase on Rory, there's real rhyme and reason behind why that is occurring right now. I just think the upside that he possesses compared to everybody else is in a different stratosphere.
Yeah, 100%. No, I see very little value in an outright ticket on Rory at 7-1, given that the form isn't there and given how I feel like PGA National in itself opens up a lot of the field because you open up volatility. I see a ton of value in DraftKings. The next best player in terms of an outright market is roughly 3 times the price. I'll go up and grab Rory, especially if I'm playing someone over 10K this week, it's Rory. And you look at the increase in the spectrum all the way down to $5,000. And there are a couple names there that I think you can grab that lessen that impact of taking Rory at 12-2. And then you can still create a relatively balanced lineup with your other 4 guys. He's the best player in the field, like Spencer said, by far. Look, it's not a great course fit like you touched on there, Byron, but he won and then came back and finished second 2 years ago in 2012 and 2014. It's part of the nature of PGA National that he essentially missed the next 3 cuts here. But he's proven, and players have proven, if you're a top end talent and you show up here with an elite weapon off the tee, like Brooks did, like Justin Thomas did, like Luke List did, like Keith Mitchell did, like Rory did, you can really step on the gas in the throw to PGA National, and knowing that he's the best player and most accomplished player in the field helps that a bit.
Yeah, I was looking at an odds board in Bet365's platform, and it said betting without Cam Young and Rory McIlroy. And I took a screenshot of it. And if I hadn't just tweeted something out right away, I would have said, makes sense. 41 total career wins from the 2 of these guys. Yeah. You know, like Rory having all 41 of them. It's just like, why would you have a market that has Cam without Cam Young? Like, he hasn't even won yet. Like, you should not, it shouldn't be a rule. You should have a rule that's not allowed to do that. Like, surely if it's a like prodigious winner on tour, then you can put him as a without. But I mean, so I guess that's my take on Cam Young at 20-1. I'm gonna just kind of let him do what Hideki did to me in a way, and just if he shows up and does it, you know. But I don't see it happening. He's built up a lot of scar tissue in the last 2 years. So Spence, give me your take on any of these guys in the 20 range. Someone you like, someone you don't.
I mean, I think if we look at this from like a DraftKings perspective, and I'll just do this like $10,000 and up, which kind of should fit all of those names in that we're talking about for the most part. There are a lot of high-end metrics that we can point towards. Like Cameron Young is number 1 in my model in projected ball striking for this course. Russell Henley is a top 3 projected par 4 scorer. Par 4 scoring is very essential here. I just have this thing of when I built this model, like maybe Russell Henley, you could convince me on if the ownership is right, but I'm probably going to be out on Cam Young. I'm probably going to be out on Fitzpatrick. I'm a wait and see on Russell Henley right now. Tom Kim is fine, like depending on where the ownership is, but I keep finding myself in this spot. And maybe this is kind of what Joe was talking about to an extent, like when it becomes very easy to make a Rory build. If I don't go Rory and like somewhere else super expensive at the top, like if I start Rory and I don't want to do Rory and Ben on. I mean, I think that's such a popular start, which I think is in play, but like I want to give something that's a little bit maybe, let's say like Rory and Connors, for example. And I don't know where Connors is going to be. We'll see where the ownership comes in there, but like it is very easy. There's a lot of $9,000 golfers to where whether we're talking about Connors or Berger or Ben on or Minwoo Lee or Poston or Cole, like I almost prefer all of those guys over almost any of the $10,000 plus options. Like I think Russell Henley is very much in that mix, but we also have this price tag of him where he's 10,200 versus a Connors who's 9,100. And I don't see a massive difference between those two. I do think Henley's a little bit better, but like for me, most of that 10,000 plus range is probably just going to be, I'm out this week and I'm going to build it Rory at the top and just kind of build down from there.
Yeah. I mean, last week, the 9K range was like 6 or 7 guys from what I can recall. So this week it's a little bit bigger, I think. And it's got much better names, like names you can lean on and almost start your build with. I think Baroff was saying you can start with Eric Cole. So
you can, yes.
Joe, any takes on any massive fades, any stances in the top there in the 10Ks?
Yeah, I mean, in DraftKings, I'm going to play Rory. Look, I bet Matt Fitzpatrick. I couldn't believe, honestly, that he wasn't like the second or third player on this odds board. I know that the form is terrible, but I also feel like he can flip that pretty quickly. He possesses enough distance. The irons are shaky, but he's played really well in some other spots in Florida in the past, particularly like places like Bay Hill. I think that I like him better on courses where the winning score is around 10 under par and not 25 under par. He's made his sort of home down here in South Florida in Palm Beach County. He plays over at Bears Club. He's familiar with this grainy strain of Bermuda grass. He had his best finish on what I think are pretty similar, like really slick play like Bermuda greens at TPC Scottsdale. And he's the most accomplished player. He's won major championships. Yeah. It's him. But here's the thing. When I bet him, he was 35-1. That's 5 times Rory's betting price. I'm not going to go down $1,000 and take Matt Fitzpatrick in DFS. I'm going to take him 5x the betting price because I feel like, is Rory 5 times more likely to win this week than Matt Fitzpatrick? I didn't think so at the time. It's why I made the bet, but I would much rather love the upside of Rory at an extra, whatever it is, $1,800 in DFS because I know what I can grab down low.
I love that. And this is really cool, like dissecting a set of players at the top here and determining how you want to invest in them this week. I will go and say that Russell Henley to me is not necessarily the best DFS option this week, because if you take a look at Russell Henley's top 10 rates, it's rather lackluster compared to if you bet him at plus 120, like I did for a top 20, which he's doing 60% of the time. And if you take a look at his return on your investment, it's probably one of the second best golfers in all of golf right now in that market. Like he's returning Scotty Scheffler-esque numbers in that top 20 market. So bet him in a top 20 and watch him finish 15th again. And is that what you want in your DFS lineup, right? Like, whereas someone that I'm not necessarily going to bet, but I'm going to roster in DFS is Tom Kim, because I know Tom Kim is going to potentially find himself in the mix and contend because he is a savage when he's in the mix, but he's not a good bet because his consistency isn't good. He's rating out in the top 40 as much as Russell Henley does in the top 20, but his upside to me is better. So that's kind of just how I'm approaching those two guys in this range. And I think it's really interesting to kind of not just take a one size fits all approach to golfers when it comes to DFS or betting. We've been provided with an opportunity to kind of deploy your assets out on these golfers in so many different ways. Really, like, take a second and sit back and engulf yourself in some creative juices and see how you can employ, your money to the best way possible for these golfers. So sometimes it takes a bit of research, sometimes it takes listening to other people, but I just encourage people to not think super square and kind of figure out a way to kind of go around the bush in a different manner. Let's dive into the nine here. I think we should probably do a bit more DFS because everyone that followed Joe from his show going to have heard a lot of the betting side of things. So feel free to drop any outrights and things like that as we go along. But we've got a loaded range here. So I'm going to say, give me the gourmet play this week, Spencer, and the cray play in this 9K range. Who's overpriced that you think is way too expensive as a cray, and who's a little spendy, but you can handle that gourmet burger there because you think they've got what it takes to handle that price tag.
So I wrote this in my DraftKings article today. Like, I have 4 fades right now in the $9,000 section. I'm not going to play Sung Jae. I'm not planning to play Chris Kirk. I'm out on Shane Lowry. I'm out on Keith Mitchell. I think every other name that we're talking about has real merit to consider here. Like, I really like Eric Cole. This is an every week thing with Eric Cole, to where I think this is a great course fit for him. I would probably rank it Cole, Benon, maybe Berger or Connors as like the third choice there. So like that will be like the 3 that I'm the most exposed to. But those first 4 names that I mentioned would be the only 4 that I'm currently out on right now.
Okay. I'm Joe, do you have a take on Berger this week?
No, I'm not. I won't bet him. I'm probably not going to play him. I'm still sort of wait and see. Not necessarily. He's actually kind of been consistent, but the just lack of reps that he's gotten concerns me. He's had some great finishes here. He lost to Patty Harrington in the playoff, like coming out as a very young player. Played well as like a favorite here on multiple occasions. So obviously it's a course that he's very fond of and continues to show up at and is a good fit for his game. But I'm not, there's other guys that I like there instead of taking that sort of associated risk with me on Berger. Like I like the 2 guys under him. Keith Mitchell's playing fantastic, has won here before. Corey Connors is been sneaky. Like I love Corey Connors this week. I do feel like he's that guy that for me that's too cheap and is a great course fit here. He lives down here. He plays at his home club is 5 miles down the road. He has not had a ton of success here, and I think people overlook that. And he's just outside of that top 20 range, like 24th, 28th, 31. He's doing the things that he always does well. But if he had finished like 9th and 14th there, he'd be like 25-1 this week and probably in the high 9K range. You can go Connors, who will be popular, Connors and Rory, and like have a ton of money left. Like if you even click Connors and Rory, you've got over $7,000 left for the rest of your roster. So it offers you a lot of flexibility. And he's the guy that I'll probably definitely have be overexposed, even though he's highly owned this week in the 9K.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go with it, because I had 65% Jake Knapp last week. I just took my chance on him, and I knew he was going to be relatively popular, but I decided that I would make sure that if he won, it was because I had enough of him and he took care of business. And, unfortunately, like I said, the other 2 guys never quite came through. But we have this beautiful thing, and I know guys come here for picks and things, but I think strategy and understanding the contest you play in and how you build lineups and how you can bet guys, we are getting back-to-back weeks now of 5K golfers. Is this going to be a thing that happens on a more regular basis? Is this a new thing? Is it once off? I feel like the field is fine enough to have Rory at 11.5 or 11.3 and still just stop at 6K flat. But they gave us a 12K Rory and 12.2K Rory and now 5K golfers. So Spence, how do you take on this 5K range now? It really changes things up.
I talked about this last week on a show. I do think, like, from a game theory perspective, it does make a massive difference of what you can actually do in these builds. I will say a lot of these $5,000 golfers, for the most part, are pretty much just out of my player pool altogether. Like, I think there's a reason why they're down there. Now, you can find a handful of names that I do think have some sort of merit, and you can consider them for lineups, but that would be more so of, like, for me, a guy like Nate Lashley. If you like, now all of a sudden at 5,700, if you want to shoot for the upside that he possesses, I think he makes a lot more sense than when we were doing it at like 7,100 when these boards were a little bit different. But I would still be very careful dipping down into this range. It's kind of a player by player situation. Like, I'll consider where Ryder comes in. I'll look to see where Yuan is with ownership. I think Andrew Novak is an interesting choice after back-to-back top 8 finishes. But like those players I just named there, that's essentially the entire range of what I'm considering down in that range. Almost everybody else is a big red X for me at this point.
Cool. So you pick your battles in that 5K range and you kind of go from there, really try and utilize that leverage that the good guys down there that you can find some really good value on provide you. Joe, from an ownership perspective, does the fact that we have such a much, would you say, a softer pricing based off of the 5K range, giving us a bit more flexibility. Do you think we got to embrace a bit more ownership because the whole field will be playing much better golfers in general? I haven't kind of comprehended this myself, so I'm trying to work through it with you too. But does that change anything for you?
I think it opens up options for people. I don't know that it changes anything necessarily to me. I do think that a lot of people are going to go Rory, and then they probably, with that second click, are like searching and trying to find a needle in a haystack in the 5K range. I think that if you get up and just cross that border, either into like 5,900 or into the guys in the low sixes, you have a lot more value for a couple extra $100 in terms of where I would project like a finish for some of these players. Like, even if you look at guys like Sig and Shelton and Silverman and, like even Sam Ryder, Andrew Novak are like significantly, Scott Stallings is 58. Like Ryan Palmer has a ton of history. They're all not great options, but they're significantly better than like Joe Highsmith and, Max Geiserman. And like there's just a big difference in terms of projected outcome, in my opinion, that I think that you can avoid some of that ownership potentially of guys that are just going to search for someone in the 5K because they want to build more top heavy and go Rory and Eric Cole.
Yeah. If you go Rory Joel Damon, for instance, who's 5-5 this week, you've got $8,075 still left to go for your next 4 picks. So that is, that Joel Damon's not the worst golfer in the world. I actually kind of like him here. This seems like a course that suits his game. If he decides to just take golf seriously again, maybe, then he might play some good golf at some point. But till then, you can just still be a Netflix star and kind of rest off his laurels on season 1, and just maybe he can parlay this into a Game of Thrones Netflix appearance thing and go 8 seasons deep and just give up on golf. Anyway, that's a tangent I didn't expect going down this week. Let's dive into some 8K guys here. I do want to mention, though, before we do that, Keith Mitchell, Joe, he's one of these guys that he hasn't had a top 5 the last 12 months, sorry. And it's bothering me to like deal with these golfers that have these deficiencies when they're under pressure. Like Keith on hole 10 in round 4, he's probably I'm going to say he's an elite driver of the golf ball. He's top 5, top 10 on the PGA Tour when it comes to accuracy and distance. Hits his ball in the water on the 10th hole. Like when he's right in the mix, he finished T19, but like it's just stuff like that just keeps him from gaining my trust to kind of really deploy him and hope that he can provide me with some upside, because he just seems to fall down the leaderboard as the weekend unfolds. Do you believe that guys always repeat those kind of patterns like Keith Mitchell does, or do you think that a certain golf course can really break the chains off of that kind of restriction?
It's interesting. I think guys like that, courses that play where you don't have to go out and fire a ton of birdies, I think it's advantageous for players like that. I struggle, and I know that there is a system that could be very profitable avoiding this. But if a guy's 113th in putting like Keith Mitchell is, like I struggle there to get on that guy, particularly because the majority of my focus in dollars on a week-to-week basis are in the outright market. So when there's players below him who I know are consistent good putters, and I talked about this with Andy a few weeks ago, my opinion is that putting is a lot less volatile and variable than people probably give credit for. I think that's a talking point that on the whole is generally wrong. If you look at the guys that consistently putt well week to week, it's actually one of the more predictive stats that we have. You look at a guy's ball striking and approach numbers, and you'll get +4, -3. They're all over the place from week to week. But the guys who are good putters consistently putt well. And in my opinion, I usually like to bet on a guy to try to catch a hotter iron week if he's shown those signs, than to try and catch a Keith Mitchell, who I know is a really bad putter, who I think is all of a sudden going to gain 5 strokes, 6 strokes on the field, which is what's required to win an outright ticket. Like you have to be really good on and around the greens if you're going to beat 156 other guys in the field, which is a little bit different from assessing it from strictly a DraftKings perspective.
That's a good point too. You know, I think it's difficult to kind of, especially when you do DFS and betting, to separate your feelings on a golfer. Like, no, he can't win, but doesn't mean you can't have him in your lineups. You know, like he's still going to provide you with a solid make cut percentage and you know, some upside there with birdies and things. So speaking of those kind of golfers, we've got Mathieu Pavon, who's $8,700 spent. We've got Sepp Straka returning here to try and take his title back from Chris Kirk. We've got Jake Knapp in the field. I don't know if he's going to be any sort of functionality right now. We've got Justin Rose, perennial heartbreaker from my side of things. Luke List, who I know you two enjoyed on the preferred lines. Rasmus, Nikolai's hopefully better brother if I put him in some lineups for myself.
He's not better.
Not better, I know. But hopefully he can be the non-evil twin this week. I don't know. So, Spence, you got anyone in this range you got your eye on?
So I have 2 outright tickets that I've punched a ticket on right now. One comes from this range. I took Steven Yeager at 40-1. I think as an industry, and we've even talked about this a little bit, Byron, like, I understand the lack of intrigue with the upside that Yeager has produced so far on the PGA Tour, but I think as an industry, we've seemed to have forgotten that this is a golfer that won 6 times on the Korn Ferry Tour. I do think winning at some point breeds more winning here. And for whatever reason, Yeager really wasn't finding himself in contention in any of these tournaments. Like, he was making a lot of cuts, but he wasn't getting those high-end finishes. Well, now all of a sudden you fast forward to the season, you have 2 top 3 finishes in his last 3 starts. He has a 22 consecutive made cuts. I think the time is going to come at some point where Yeager finally gets across the finish line. A ball striking course like this, and we saw the putter heat up recently for him. So now if you can merge together this putter with the incredible ball striking that he brings every single week, I think he is ripe for a victory at some moment here. And I thought 40-1 was a really intriguing price. And even when we look here on DraftKings at what is he, 8,800? I thought that was far too cheap. Like, he was the best value for me, 8,000 or above.
I love Yeager as a DK play. I just have it in my head that he's not going to win a tournament. I've watched it, and and I'm not saying that you're right or wrong. We don't know until the week's done, right? I didn't believe that personally, as a Jake Knapp outright ticket holder, didn't believe he was going to win the tournament just after watching the first 4 holes. So somehow these guys figure it out. They find some divine inspiration. They get in a groove, in a flow, and things can change. But Yeager, to me, always, he's similar in Keith Mitchell's. Like, he finished T3, but he shot 63 on Sunday to finish T3. You know, it wasn't like he was, I don't know.
I think the only thing I will add to that's at least worth noting here is, and I think this is why he's such a great DraftKings play, maybe above anything else. Like, I still like the outright number that I got on him,
40,
but
by the way.
Like, at 8,800, he's the 17th price player on the board. You no longer need that victory that you're talking about. Like, if he's 10,500, we're having a different discussion at this point of what his upside actually is. And that might be a different discussion to be had, but he's just too cheap for, I mean, if he comes in 8th place, he comes in 11th place, I'm going to be happy with that performance from what I think like the price tag should have been for him.
What do you think?
I love Yeager. I think I'm starting to sort of reframe my mind in terms of guys that I think can win, and where I think that scar tissue can build and perpetuate negativity that is detrimental to players is more so with top end players who had a lot of success winning early in their career. And even like someone like Scheffler, like someone who won a ton of times and is expecting that to continue to happen and it doesn't. I think that negativity struggles. I'm no longer willing to say, like, do I think this guy can win a tournament he's never won before? No, I can't really say that with anybody. We would have said that with Grayson Murray. We would have said that with Nick Dunlap. We would have said that with Jake Knapp. We would have said that with Mathieu Pavon. We would have said that with endless guys. Think of the guys that have won the Honda. Would you have ever thought that they would have won this event? Chris Kirk, Sepp Straka. These are all losers, perennial losers. Matt Jones, even Keith Mitchell when he won. All of these guys were not guys that you came into that tournament and if you would have asked yourself that question, do I really believe he can win a golf tournament? You would have probably answered that no at the time. But these are guys who have come through at this event with really no track record and historic winning pedigree to sort of ride that confidence on, and we're able to break through. 2 top threes in his last 3 starts are great results for Jaeger. I think distance is probably my biggest, and I haven't listened to a ton of pods, but if I were going to say a point that I'm emphasizing more that most people probably won't, it's sheer distance here. And he's picked up a ton of ball speed and made big, giant strides in that category. You mentioned a streaky putter that he's relied on. He's been one of the best tee to green guys for the last 6 months of play. So I'm on Jaeger as well.
Yeah, I was doing the research show last night and I filtered on just trying to see how much a guy can gain off the tee at this venue. And in doing so, I think I saw Jaeger in the last 2 years, one of the years he led the field in strokes gained off the tee. So he's comfortable driving the golf ball around you. Now he's got even more distance. Who knows how that helps? Maybe he can hit 3-wood when he wanted to hit driver. I don't know. But I love him too. I've got this thing with these certain guys that I kind of just accept that I'm not going to bet. And if they bite me, they bite me. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen. And it's happened, it definitely has. Someone that can win and has arguably got the best opportunity to play his best golf on a course that suits him the best so far is Mathieu Pavon. He's talk about the balls to go and win a tournament, finish third at Pebble, and then just say, you know what? I'm out of the first elevated event that I'm going to have an opportunity to play in. Or the second, he's just you know what? Genesis, not for me. I'm going to take a bit of a break. I said on the show, he's probably busy moving all his stuff from France over here now because he knows for a fact he's going to be in America for the next little while because he's secured himself 2 years worth of play and all that jazz. I think this course suits him great. I know he's a fader of the golf ball. I know you typically want to hit a bit of a draw here, but I think the way he hits his irons, I think the way he putts, the short game he has, he seems like a perfect option down here in this 8K range. And I bet him as well. I think at a 50-1. So it's a really nice number for Pavon. Do you guys have any reservations on him, or do you think he's looking good? Spence?
I probably prefer him it's probably the opposite answer of what you gave, Byron. I like Pavon on DraftKings. I couldn't get there in the outright market on him, but the short game numbers look great. He's 6th in my model in weighted strokes gained total for this course. He's the number 1 player. If you just, obviously you win a golf tournament and you have a couple other high-end finishes, you're going to be the number 1 player this season in strokes gained total for this. But, the ball striking's been great. The approach numbers look fantastic. Number 1 in my model from proximity from 150 to 175 yards. I guess the only thing with him that would worry me ever so slightly is I do think that this, maybe to some extent and maybe not, is you're really catching a falling knife at this point potentially to where we've seen the high end results and now there's a reason why he's 8,700 and he's 50-1 or less to win a golf tournament. There's always a chance that he had a hot month and he returns back to whatever his true baseline is. That would be my only concern, but my numbers love him for what we see right now.
Yeah, especially after a 3-week break. That is concerning. He's not keeping that momentum, Joe.
Yeah, I can't do it. It's too high for me. If he didn't have the win, look, Florida's a lot different than California golf.
Yeah.
At the Farmers, there's not a single speck of water on that entire golf course except for the 18th hole. At Pebble Beach, there's no real risk of ever going in the Pacific Ocean. There's water everywhere on this golf course. It is a totally different style than what he played at Pebble Beach and Torrey Pines. And pricing him up there with someone with a lot more consistency like Jaeger, like McCarthy or Straka, who have had success here and understand Southeast United States golf, I'm just much more inclined to click those guys. And that's probably what I'll end up doing.
You even see in the betting market right now, Straka's already jumped out to minus 130 against Pavon at particular books out there. Jaeger's becoming a pretty substantial favorite. So that's always worrisome to me those are, I think in those spots, I like Straka, I love Jaeger, so I'm not so concerned of the players that he's an underdog against, but it does become concerning where over and over and over again, you see a guy an underdog against all his counterparts in that range.
Yeah. And I think I may just land up leaving that 50 out there as the betting option, and I'll just leave him alone in DFS. I think if he has another crazy week, he wins this thing kind of thing. And if he blows up, then it's just an outright that I didn't cash. I've got other guys that can do it. I've got 7 other outrights this week that can do that for me. So we're going to have a fun. We've got full Engage 8 mode at the Cognizant Classic this week. So let's go from Joe said something about know how to play Southeast golf, and the fact that some guys have not played good golf here when they typically should have. And I have an outright on Tom Hoge, 66-1 for Tom Hoge. What on earth has been his issue around this golf course? He's elite with the iron play, and it's just never transpired here. It should. He's a good long iron player, and he's not like overwhelmed off the tee here. So it's just really interesting how I'm hoping that the form that he brings this week is he's been playing great golf, and I'm kind of curious to see if recent form clashes with course history in a positive way or not. Joe, go ahead.
So I don't really know why he's not good here, because he's great from 125 to 200 yards. He's been great on the West Coast. Obviously has not had much success here. I think maybe it has something to do with the Bermuda. On my strokes gain around the green, when I sort of filtered in Bermuda grass, he's 107th in the field. He's not long off the tee either, so he doesn't have that plus. And I think this course there's nothing tricky necessarily about it. They're pretty fairly large size greens, like 7,000 square feet. But I know, because I've played this place, visually it does something to you. So like if Tom Hoge is staring at a green at Riviera from 175 yards, or at Pebble, or at somewhere else, even if it's the same size green, it's just different here, because the whole one side is protected by water, which makes you visually, and maybe not psychologically, aim at the pin. You're aiming away from the trouble, right? You're trying to play it safe, which puts you in a different mindset, with more protective with your tee shots. And you just have to step up there and hit that shot, because the bailouts are dead. Yeah. Like you almost might as like you can't risk going in the water, because it's 2 shots, right? You can shoot yourself out of the tournament really quickly here. But if you play it safe and you go to these areas and chipping areas and bunkers on the opposite side of the water, it is almost an impossible up and down. 15, 16, 17, nobody gets those up and down from those greenside bunkers. Like it's one of the lowest rates that you'll see all year, because it's just a really hard, almost impossible shot that, if you blade it a little bit, it's going to roll right into that water and double screw you. So it's just a place that you have to be familiar with. It's a stepping up and hitting and firing at pins when there's trouble all around it, which maybe that has something psychologically to do why he hasn't had a ton of success here. Very likely.
Spence, any takes on that, and any other guys you kind of got your eye on here in the 7s that you want to mention?
Yeah, I'll mention one in a second. I think when I look at my model, there's, let's call it 4 red flag sort of trends and statistics for Hoge that would worry me and maybe would explain the course history. He's 133rd in my model in strokes gained total in moderate to severe wind. I think that could potentially hurt some of his approach numbers there. Like the approach numbers are going to look great when you just run those numbers the way they are. But if all of a sudden the iron play gets worse, that hurts one of the big parts of his game. 129th in my model in strokes gained total on hard courses. So once again, some of these players are better at Birdie Fest. Some of them are better at tough courses. Like Joe talked about it with Fitzpatrick. He's a player that you throw him on a difficult course, all of a sudden his upside increases for what his high-end results can be.
Yeah.
Joe talked a little bit about the sand safe percentage and some of those factors there. Hoagie's 80th in my model in that area. And then kind of just doubling back down on the off the tee stuff that Joe was talking about. He's 116th in my model in expected total driving for this property. He's 142nd when you find these hard to hit fairways that like more challenge with it. And that puts him at 116th there, 99th in distance, 67th for accuracy. I think when he pops, he has the potential to pop in a big way just because of the iron play and some of that he brings to the mix. But he is highly volatile to me. And that's probably like a golfer to where I'm not going to get on him, but I think he's a better outright play probably, or like a better large field GPP sort of a contest play. He has tons of miscut equity. We've seen that in the past, and there's a reason why that comes into play. So I'm not looking to like find a matchup on Tom Hoagie and then, take an opponent on. Like, it's just, that's not the way I want to go about that. For me, though, I'm going to go with the golfer that is a little bit shorter off the tee and a guy that I didn't necessarily enter the week wanting to play, but I really like Christian Bezaden when you look at his approach numbers that he's bringing. So he's gained between 1.3 to 4.7 shots with his irons over his past 4 starts. The driver's going to have to improve. He has lost to the field in his last 8 tournaments there, but maybe this can be one of those spots for him where he takes a little bit different of approach, where find the fairway, not that he's the most accurate golfer in the world, but find the fairway, create this combination of weighted proximity and putting. Is that going to be enough? I don't know necessarily, but I still thought he should have been like $1,000 more expensive on DraftKings. And I think as a DraftKings price, he was really interesting. And then we saw him open the 80 to 90 to 1 range. I got him at 66 to 1. I missed some of that movement there. I thought 50 to 1 was the fair price on him. I think lower than that is you're pushing it too far. But I think the movement we've seen on him is legitimate at this point.
I love him. I was contemplating betting him outright, but I just don't think he can get across the line for me. It's just,
you might be right on that.
He's just one of these guys, but I'm going to be betting him top 40 at minus 120. That's just going to happen. I'm looking at his stuff here. He's had 3 consecutive top 30s in his last 3 starts, and he's had a 42nd and a 25th at this venue. So it screamed like much better game, same kind of golfer. Like, I was speaking to his trainer when I was at the John Deere 2 years ago, and he's just like, he refuses to be a modern day golfer. He's hitting his irons like prime Tiger right now, but he refuses to do what it takes from a driving perspective to get length and just make things easier for yourself. He's too passive. He's too defensive on the course. Maybe that helps him at this kind of a venue. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I love him, just not like I'm keeping him in my basement, minus 120, top 40. So, Joe, hit me with some 7K guys before we dive into the sixes and wrap ourselves up here.
Okay, so I like Adam Svensson. I think that he's going to be extremely, extremely popular. I followed him here en route to a really good finish a few years ago, and it's the reason I started betting him. I was blown away by his ball striking ability and his ability to miss like 6-foot putts, which I also found out that day. But his numbers are really solid. I mean, the top 10 at Riviera was kind of very unpredictably and unexpected for a guy like Adam Svensson. So he ranks really high in the model that I run. Yeah. The guy I don't ever like this guy, but my model kind of loves him this week, and I'm sort of coming around, is 7,100 Mav McNeely. He's playing much better. He's had, let me see, did I see some good? Okay, so he has a T11 in 2020 at this event when it was the Honda. He's been really hot with the putter lately, but he's good on and around the greens. He's got some pretty good chipping to him. He's decent off the tee. He's got enough distance that I'm kind of looking for, that I'm sneaking in there as sort of my special sauce for the week. And at 7,100, I don't feel like it's one of those weird prices where I don't feel like a lot of people with the sticker will go there when they can go and find the guys in the high 6s that they will perceive to be a little bit more value and a better price point. So those are kind of 2 that I'm looking at. One that I think will be really popular, and then Mav, we'll see as the week progresses, but I think could get a little sneaky.
Yeah, he's interesting, man. And I think he's the perfect price because he's also one of these guys that gets real jumpy around the lead. Like that's the thing with Mav. But at this price point, that's completely fine. I'm totally cool with that. I'll definitely be. I mean, he's coming back from injury. I think he's starting to wrap that driver quite nicely. Like I was looking at his distance stuff. He's getting it above average out there. So it's not a guy that you kind of expect to do that, and he has.
Top 6 at the Waste Management. Like that came out of nowhere, and then 13th last week in Mexico. Yeah. So made 4 consecutive cuts. He's starting to get back in a little groove.
He sure is. And one market I was looking at, and I was just like laying on the couch, just scrolling, the South Africans. Bezzy is plus 130 versus EVR and Higo. I just would imagine. Yeah, I was just thinking like Higo's not even part of the equation on this golf course. I'm gonna eat my words, but it's basically Bezzy plus 130 versus EVR. Like to me, that's just like a head-to-head straight-up matchup there. And I'm kind of curious if I'm going to pull the trigger there. So do you guys have like a take on EVR at all? Because I know we all love Bezzy, but is EVR's playing good golf too? I don't know if this course suits him as much as, the courses we've come from.
I always worry about bets like this. Like that being said, Van Rooyen's 76th in my model. There's really not much to love. And you kind of talked about the Higo equation. He's 107th for me. Those are usually stay away spots just because I don't see the value when it becomes a 3-man sort of a battle like that. But that's more of a personal choice. But like, I am not in on Van Rooyen necessarily, and I'm out on Higo also. So I know that doesn't answer your question, unfortunately, Byron, but it's two golfers that I don't like that I get Bezaden out on the good end of it.
Yeah, at plus 130. That's like, to me, it's a very nice number. I don't think I'd like it minus 125 or something like that, but who knows? Let's dive into the sixes. I know we kind of scooting around the hour mark, and I know Idone is back on back-to-back hours here, so we're going to get him off the camera before his face melts off here. But Joe, hit us with your favorite value play kind of situation here in the sixes. I know Carson Young's been playing some good golf. Brandon Wu, Sammy Velamaki, maybe Alexander Bjork has my attention to a degree. I think he finally shows up to a golf course that can really let his kind of skill set shine this week. So who's catching your eye?
I have two, and I'm probably clicking them both in my lineup, and they're both 6,200. CT Pan, Baroff talked me into him this morning. He laid out a bunch of great points on why you should like CT Pan this week. I think he had the best round on Sunday at T3 in Mexico. He's had some success here in the past as well with the T3 back in 2021, and then a 16th in his last finish. The other one is Chan Kim. I think he's a great course fit for this place. He's striking. His approach numbers have been pretty good. He's a good scrambler. He also top 10 in Mexico. He also top 10 right before that. I want to say it was the American Express. Yeah, I'm sorry, T14 at the American Express.
Yeah.
He won twice late summer, like in August, September, back-to-back on the Korn Ferry Tour. He actually was second on the Korn Ferry Tour in points. So he had a much better season last year than Jake Knapp, than Grayson Murray, two guys who you have seen get wins. And both of those players right there at 6,200. I do think if you want to stack Rory with a high 9K guy and you want to avoid the volatility of the 5K range, taking like two of them there, I think they both have pretty high likelihood of making the cut this week. Now, we are talking about PGA National, so it can all go out the window very quickly. But those are two that I sort of have starred in the 6K range.
I don't want to be the guy that keeps on pushing back, but I had Chan Kim as an outright last week. I had him as a top 20. I feel like I'm the Chan Kim whisperer in a way. I'm taking over Styx's, not really, but never will be the Chan Kim whisperer. But I took a look. 28 under par was his one win on the KFT. 20 under par was his other. At the Amex, think about how you go low there. Think about Mexico going low.
Yeah.
He struggled on the Korn Ferry Tour just in a few starts on hard courses. That can easily change, like he's playing good golf right now. But that does just give me a bit of pause in that respect there. But I've got my spoils from him already. So I'm cool like letting him ride off into the sunshine and just disintegrating, like if he does. So just my fair share of warning in that department on Chan. I do love CT Pan. Got a 300-1, drop that in the Discord this morning. CT Pan, a T3 last week and a T3 here in 2021. I mean, that's like for a 300-1 bet, I feel like that was a fun bet to make. I don't know. Just the thrill was enough just to make the bet before you even play. So Spence, hit me with some guys in this range and give the people what they need to know.
I mean, I think if like push came to shove and I was able to get into the $7,000 section, I would probably rather play like Rio, Svensson, Joe mentioned him, Doug Gim, Adam Schenk. Like, I do think there's a little bit of a step up in class, and then there's like that next move up into Bezaden Hout and into like, if you want to move all the way up into Jaeger there. I mean, we're getting into different price ranges, but I think in the $6,000 range, like the two for me that were the most intriguing that I will definitely have exposure to this week. I thought Austin Eckroat is a good play at the price. I thought Brandon Wu. I know last week was the Brandon Wu course that, I mean, he once again produced, but like didn't necessarily love him for that venue last week, and he continues to prove me wrong. But it's a spot this tournament where he was a top 40 player in almost all iterations of how I built my sheet. Top 25 for ball striking. Weighted proximity numbers were inside the top 40. So there's going to be these downside numbers to point to for any of these golfers in the $6,000 range. And that's the reason why I think there's a step down in class between options like that and, somebody like Svensson who can give you a little bit more of that upside potential. But it would probably be Eckroat and Wu for me in the 6,000s that I'll have the most exposure to.
Cool. Yeah, like you mentioned, I know you get real picky in the lower price situation. You're not a fan of just. Whereas I'm cool, like I'm very trusting. I'm a very trusting guy. I'll let some cheapo kind of take my life away from me if it happens.
It's like a very similar mentality for whatever reason. I don't know why my brain goes in this direction. Like, so when you deal with fantasy football, for example, and you do dynasty football drafts and everybody wants to spread out their portfolio to a bunch of different players and have the mix and match that comes into play. That's never been me. I find my couple guys I like, and then I go overweight in those spots and I try to pair them with the Rorys at the top. And that's how I try to win GPP contests, is just find the handful of names I like at the bottom. And it gives me more opportunities to if I'm correct, obviously that's where the high end comes into play. If you're wrong, then you have a terrible week and all that Rory exposure dips down a little bit. But I mean, even with that being said, we're still talking about a handful of options. When push comes to shove here, there's going to be 10 plus names for me that are between 5,000 and 6,900 that will make the pool in some fashion. It's just some are going to be a little bit more exposure than others.
Yeah. I like the point you made about Brandon Wu. And I think looking at guys who may have been over popular the week prior, particularly in these ranges, I always tend to gear and hone in and sort of visually drawn to those guys the following week. Another one right above him that I'm looking at is Johnny Vegas. People love Johnny Vegas last week. Dude, find me a guy who's made 7 consecutive cuts at the Honda Classic. That's Johnny Vegas. I believe he was first round leader. If you're a first round leader bet guy, I think he did it twice in back-to-back years at the Honda. But some impressive finishes, 4th, 16th. The guy actually in 2018 made the cut here and ended up finishing for the week 14 over par. That's what this place could do to you. So, and it could happen really fast, but 7 consecutive cuts at the Honda. I don't know many players who can say that they've done that.
Yeah, because with the volatility of this golf course, that is so impressive.
You just 5K, 6K. You want a guy who's going to make the cut. That's all you want here.
Yeah.
The 6 out of 6 percentage is going to be so low this week. Yeah. It always is, because you're going to end up with Eric Cole and Matt Fitzpatrick and somebody else big who missed the cut. It happens every year here, and it's really hard. If you can get some of these guys through, it gives you so much of a better chance.
Yes.
Do we have thoughts on Gary Woodland this week?
He loves this place, dude. He plays down in Delray. I'm rooting for him. He's played well here a couple of times before. Was super encouraged about his showing at the Genesis, especially being paired with the Justin Thomas and Tiger. But I still have concerns about getting it straight off the tee for Gary. So, but I don't mind it.
Hey, he was the only one of those 3. The only person of that 3 ball was the person that had just recent brain surgery to make the weekend.
Yeah. Wild.
What on earth was going on there? I'll wrap up with the 5s. Yeah, I got a Sam Ryder who's finished top 10 in his last 2 starts at this venue, $5,900. And he's one of the best iron players in the field. So give me an elite trait or a top end trait for $5,900. I'll take it with this kind of course history. And then Andrew Novak is trying to catch some lightning in a bottle right now. He played nicely last week, and he also did some good stuff at the Waste Management. We've got back-to-back top 8s. So we'll see what he can get up to. I think those are going to be my 2 guys in the 5s. Any other names you guys want to say, and then we get out of here?
I mean, boring answer. I will give the same 2 names that you talked about. I think they're 2 of the better values down in that range. My model like Chandler Phillips. I talked a little bit about the boomer bust potential of an option like Nate Lashley. I think Carl Yuan, Parker Cootie. I mean, we're starting to get gross at a certain point, but there's at least you mentioned it best, Byron. You're trying to find a particular trait that you can hone in on. And while you are taking on a ton of volatility to the mix, it's the point that Joe keeps talking about. PGA National is a highly volatile course at its core. So water, anytime you throw water into the mix, it just massively alters the trajectory of the venue. So I think there's names that you can consider down there. I would try to find something that they're high end in and kind of just hold on to that and hope that you kind of pick the right names there. But at a certain point, like outside of really Novak and Ryder, and I don't have enough numbers on Phillips, everybody else is outside the top 50 of my model.
Yeah. Kind of like Ryder as well. I'm probably going in full transparency to gear toward those two guys and bottom out at the 6,200. But there's a dart throw down here that's a bit interesting. So what if I told you there was a guy that during the fall swing not only won an event, but finished T2 an event during the fall swing and has a win at the Honda Classic, and he's $5,300?
I'm buying, baby.
It's Camilo Villegas.
Yes, let's go.
Camilo had a T2 at the WWT championship. He won in Bermuda. He won the Honda Classic before in his career. Do you know who he beat at the Honda that year? Who finished second?
What was the year?
2010.
Oh,
it's a big name in golf this week.
No, go ahead.
It was my first time in the Honda Classic. Camilo beat Anthony Kim that week at the Honda Classic. So Anthony Kim returns. But I don't know, just an interesting name. Like, he's not playing great, but if you're going to take a full-on dart throw, he's won here. He obviously has some confidence rolling over from the end of that fall swing there with a win in a T2. Hasn't played great to start 2024, but another Florida guy who should feel more comfortable on Bermuda grass. 5,300 if you're in at like a big GPP, like a $5 or a $1 or something, and you want to build some lineups with some volatility and go all the way down to 5,300, he's a name I might click.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And if you are clicking on anything RotoBaller Premium, where you want to do that with us, use code TEOFF if you want to support Spencer. Use code, is it Lines, Joe? It's Lines?
Yes, Lines.
Code Lines if you want to support Joe, and code Maniac if you want to support me. Or if you just want to, we were giving you 30% off with code NEW, and we weren't getting any of that kickback for our little personal stuff. Now you got to support us. We're going to give you 10%, but it's going to help us a lot. We know we got a few of you guys on board. We really appreciate all of you that were in the chat. We really appreciate all of you that have been in the Discord, and we really appreciate all of you riding with us. We've provided 2 winners in the last 2 months, so that's been relatively good, all things considered industry-wise. It's been tough to hit a winner these years. So, Joe, thank you for joining us on the show. I know we kept you a touch longer than we should have, but we just love you so much we couldn't resist. Feel free to kind of rattle off what you're getting up to for the rest of the week and hand it off to Spence after that.
Yeah, sounds good, guys. Love you too, as always. Appreciate the RotoBaller family. I've got, just follow me at Tour Picks. It's going to have all my content for this week. I've got like 4 or 5 articles coming out on RotoBaller. Some of them are up now, the top 10, and the course preview is totally free. Click that, totally free. If you want to use that promo code LINES, you'll get access to the Market Movers piece. You'll get our round table, sort of a DFS discussion, which we all complete each and every week, and then you'll get access to the long shots video, which will be out tomorrow. This is honestly my favorite week of the year. I feel like I know this course better than any on the PGA Tour. The only problem with that is it's maybe the hardest course to predict that we get all year, but I know the ins and outs. I'll be there this week, all weekend. If you're going to the Cognizant Classic, make sure to send me a DM, stop by and say hi. I would love to meet you, and have a great week, guys.
Spence?
I mean, I'll close this a little bit differently. I mean, like as Joe said, if you're not already subscribed to RotoBaller, consider doing it for all his pieces, your pieces, Byron, that we talk about all the time, all mine. Like, we have tons of content on the website. I do want to note that what Ryan wrote into the chat with that Ben On ticket moving to 28-1, we didn't really discuss that. I think once you, and this is just like an answer to be given in general, if you ever see a number go from like 45 to 28, you're never going to get that pushback back up. Like, once a number's moved, the ship has sailed. It's never going to get back further. Like, that move has been done. And then second thing, Joe, I know you were talking a little bit that you like wrestling. I don't know if you've seen this picture back there. Shawn Michaels.
Is that a sharpshooter?
Yeah, it's this it's from the Montreal.
The screw job.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Dude, I have I took my son to his first wrestling event a few weeks ago, and I wore a Bret Hart shirt. So that was a tough day for me, man. I was really invested heavily in WWE wrestling at that time, and was sad. I think I may have cried during that very moment. But love to see it, buddy. Love to see it.
Who is, just as we close the show, who is your favorite wrestler? Is it Bret Hart?
Bret Hart all time. Yeah. My son's favorite wrestler who we got to see in Miami a few weeks ago is a man by the name of LA Knight. He is new. He's pretty funny. But yeah, Bret Hart's the dude for me.
I will go with Triple H. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Byron.
Sweet chin music, baby. He's always been my guy.
Yeah.
The other end of the screw job, dude. You would like him.
The DX. So,
all right, fellas.
All right, boys. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. I did reply to Ryan in the chat there a little bit and just said, I doubt it's going to get shorter, but I don't know if it's going to bounce back either. I think it's kind of found its stomping ground. Have a great week. I'll probably see if we'll probably be doing some wrestling, hacking in Hollywood on my show then, Joe. So I think that's the way I'm going to have to brush up on my wrestling for you. And look forward to chatting to you again. We'll catch you guys all next week, Monday, for the RotoBaller PGA show. As always, pivot your face off. Have a great week, and we'll see you guys then. Cheers.